And I cannot say it as strongly as I can't find strong enough words to say that this province is going to face a water crisis really soon. I call it not the perfect storm, but the perfect drought. Now, some people in government know this, and so they've been doing a lot of studying. And so what they have decided to do is set Alberta on a path of water markets. Around the world, there's a huge dispute as to what path to take in a world where demand is outstripping supply so dramatically. And don't forget, we're going to add another 3 billion people to the planet. So that there tend to be two paths. One path says that water is a commons, it's a public trust, it's a human right. It doesn't belong to anyone, it belongs to all the people of that community, it belongs to future generations, and so needs to be protected in law, needs to be protected in the ecosystem as well, and therefore you have to put a sliding scale of values on who's going to have access and why. So you have to do planning and thinking. The other is the exact opposite. The other says, let the market take it. The market will determine everything. It will determine who gets water. It will move to a more efficient use of that water, and it will increase industry and it'll increase profits, and that can only be a good thing. Most parts of Canada are going, well, some parts are going kind of a little bit of both. Quebec has just declared its water to be a public trust, which is a really important step forward in Quebec. But Alberta has decided to open its water up to become a water market. It started in 1999 when it had the new Water Act to basically look at the traditional way water had been allocated here, and it was allocated free to big industrial complexes and energy companies and big municipalities and big agribusiness interests. Then they talked about beginning the process of water transfers, is the term they're using, but by any other name. A transfer that you pay for is a water market. That's where you buy and sell on the open market. And there are now 3 reports coming from the Alberta government. They are think pieces, and every one of them is leading in the same direction, which is to expand this transfer market system to all of Alberta, to deregulate it so that there's no longer even a requirement to have a water management plan in place and not have the ability for the public to have a say, and really open it up to buying and selling. And this, I cannot tell you how dangerous this is. What's going to happen is that, first of all, the speculators, the licensees who got this water in the first place for nothing, are now holding licenses worth a great deal of money. They will become speculators. Those who are big enough will buy up smaller speculators, and then the bargaining will be on. The country I know that's done this first is Australia, and we should collectively look at Australia as the canary in the minefield or the mine shaft for us. Australia, just like Alberta, has a limited amount of water, was using its water to grow massive amounts of rice, cotton, wine, which they ship all over the world, and they were killing their river system, the Murray-Darling, the driest inhabited continent on the planet. They were using their limited water resource to make themselves rich. Lo and behold, no surprise, the Murray-Darling is dying from the mouth up, just as the rivers here are, because they just overpumped it for these commodity exports. So in 1994, the Conservative government of the day decided to convert the licenses, which just like Alberta had been given for free, and the licensees now were encouraged to trade. But within a decade, the government was forced to try to buy those licenses back, because now they're desperate to buy water back for the ecosystem so that the river doesn't die and they have no more water left in Australia. So the holders said, fine, we'll sell it back to you, but we're going to set the market price. And the price of water went from $2, this is rural water in Australia, went from $2 a megaliter a decade ago to $2,400 a megaliter now. So everybody is now competing for that water, and you can imagine who gets left behind. Small farmers, small communities, indigenous peoples, rural communities, anybody who can't afford to play in that game. They have a totally unregulated water brokering system. Somebody calls it the cowboy system of water brokering, where you just buyers find sellers, and out you go, putting it on the market. And most recently, of course, as I predicted when they first did this, now there are big investment companies, banks, and even international investors coming up, buying up Australia's water market. A big Japanese company just bought $130 million worth of rural water to grow almonds for export. So now they're leasing it back to the farmers there and saying, well, you'll grow what we tell you to grow. Not water, this isn't food for Australians. This is, again, just all for profit for export. Big investment company from California has moved in. An Australian company is scouring the market, the world, looking for water for these markets to bring back. And Australia has totally and completely lost control of its water. This is going to happen here if it's allowed to happen. And I can tell you that I believe that we're on the verge of a fight here that could actually galvanize the Albertan people, supported by the people of Canada. I want you to know that. I happen to think this issue transcends left-right politics. If your well goes dry, if your pond dries up, if the birds can't fly or land in your land, if you can't grow anything because the water's been sold from under your feet, you can be left or right, and you can still be really unhappy. And I believe with all my heart that we can make this an issue that every single Albertan will understand, and this can become a health issue, or we can connect it back to the health issue. A lot of us are working on a notion that we're calling the commons, the recovery of the commons. And the concept is that once there was a time, it was even written in many laws, where it was understood there were certain things that you couldn't own and you couldn't deny to somebody because they didn't have the ability to pay. Water and air and oceans, fish, life, soil, right? There's the modern commons, which is education, healthcare, social security. There's the cultural commons, stories and song and language. These are the ways that we express common values. But there has been an assault on this commons. Some people call it the modern enclosure of the commons. The first one in Western world was in England when they removed the right of peasants to farm and graze and hunt on nobility land, and many of them died because their commons right to this land was lost. But now there's an assault on everything left standing. I call it the privatization of absolutely everything. The fight for universal health care, the fight to hold on to public health care is a huge piece of the fight back against this assault on the commons. Now we have to stand together and say no to another assault on the commons and to declare once and for all that nobody owns water. Everybody owns water. In other words, it belongs to all people, it belongs to the ecosystem, it belongs to other species, it belongs to future generations who have as much right to it as we do, and it is a fundamental and lasting human right. And you should know that on July 28th, of this past July 28th, the General Assembly of the United Nations finally, after many years, adopted a resolution that recognized the human right to drinking water and sanitation. It was an extraordinarily important moment. And of all the countries in the world, only Canada and Tonga are still opposed to the human right to water at the United Nations, to our shame. So I'm here today to say that we want to work with you, expand our work with you, not only on health care, but to introduce this new, very important struggle. Because if you are having to deal with families in 20 years, or maybe even 10 years, who don't have access to clean water because they can't pay for it, you'll remember that. I remember that woman. She came to our convention in 2010 and she warned us, and here it will be. In Detroit, Michigan, a couple of years ago, they cut off the water to 42,000 families because they couldn't pay. So don't think this is just an issue for people in faraway countries. And mostly they were African American, poor people, obviously, older people, and single mothers. That's who got punished because they could not afford to pay their water bill. Everywhere around the world, prices of water are soaring. We have to keep water in the public realm. It is a public service. It is a fundamental human right. It is a public trust, and we have to state this. I know that we have a few minutes. I'm hoping we have a few minutes to talk together. So I'll stop talking now because I could talk forever and ever about this issue. But I'd love to hear from you and what we can do together. I just want to end with two quotes that mean, actually I'm going to read you three quotes. One that I think tells a lot of the story. This is a man who is in the water business. And he says this: the water wars that the popular media would have us all believe to be inevitable will not be fought on a battlefield between opposing armies, but on the trading floor of the world grain markets between virtual water warriors in the form of commodity traders. This is how it's going to happen. It's not going to be obvious. It's not going to be a fight around a water pond, although those are happening in some parts of the world. It is going to be the control taken of water through investment bankers, through dealers, through brokers, through those corporate interests that are circling water, because as this water diminishes and the demand grows, it is becoming blue gold. It is the liquid gold. It is the black gold. We talked about oil being black gold. This is the blue gold of the future, and we have to say no to their taking of it now. The two other quotes, one was from the great Carl Sagan, who was an environmental scientist in the United States, and he said something I love. He said, "Anything else you are interested in is not going to happen if you cannot breathe the air and drink the water. Don't sit this one out. Do something. You are, by accident of fate, alive at an absolutely critical moment in the history of our planet." And the other is from Tolkien. I kind of have had Tolkien on the brain since I called the tar sands Canada's Mordor a couple of years ago and created a bit of a scene in this province. And it was one of the energy company officials said, "Well, it's not as bad as Mordor." And I thought, really, I don't think you want to admit that it's not as bad as the death of all nature. Maybe you want to say it's a totally inappropriate comparison, but no. But this is, I don't know if you remember from the film or the book, but there's a night when Gandalf, the wizard, is watching, he's waiting for the army, the evil army that's going to come, and all good things may perish. And Gandalf talks here about stewardship. And I just want to say that I know that Heather and your elected officials and every one of you are stewards of the healthcare, public health care in this province, in this country. So you are stewards of the commons. And so I just want to ask you to join us to become stewards of your public water, because it's an enormously important fight, and it is a sister fight to the fight to health care. So this is Tolkien speaking, this is Gandalf speaking to this knight that he's so terrified of. He says, "The rule of no realm is mine, but all worthy things that are in peril, as the world now stands, those are my care. And for my part, I shall not wholly fail in my task. If anything passes through this night that can still grow fair or bear fruit and flower again in the days to come. For I too am a steward. Did you not know?" Thank you so much.